Welcome to Intended Consequences, the official podcast of the Strategy Corp Institute of Public Policy and Economy. I'm your host, Mitch Davidson. Today, we're excited to be joined by a superstar lawyer and politico, Walied Soliman. In his day job, Walied is the Canadian chair of the law firm Norton Rose Fulbright, where he specializes in proxy battles. He was the only lawyer featured in a report on Business Magazine's Power 50. He's also on the board of the Toronto Sick Kids Hospital Foundation and was recently named the United Nations Association in Canada's 2019 Global Citizen Laureate. In his spare time, he also served as a campaign co-chair for Erin O'Toole's successful leadership bid for the Conservative Party of Canada. Walied, thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Hey Mitch, it's so nice to speak to you, my friend.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and as you can hear by the intro, I think you've been plenty busy, so that might explain it.
Yeah.
We have a lot to talk about when it comes to the Conservative leadership race and politics and all that, but I've known you for a few years now, and I want to hopefully give our listeners a sense of who you are. And one of the things that sort of sticks out to me that was mentioned in the intro, one of your accomplishments as of late, is this United Nations Association in Canada 2019 Global Citizen Laureate Award that you got for your work at Sick Kids Hospital Foundation, mental health issues, and just giving back to Canada in general. I was actually at that award dinner when we were still allowed to go to dinners and congregate
yeah,
in
isn't that
groups.
Crazy? Seems like it was forever ago, eh?
It really does, but you gave a really compassionate and interesting speech about sort of how your family came to Canada and your roots and what that award meant to you. And I just wanted to start there and say, as a bit of a question, perhaps you can give us a sense of what that award meant, why it was that they picked you, and sort of the background that you have and what it's given you to drive to give back to Canada.
It's funny, Mitch, as you talk about that, that was just a year ago. And it's remarkable how much the world has changed in that year. I mean, we had, several hundred of our friends in, the Royal Ontario Museum, and we were all, shaking hands and hugging and having that sort of general fun camaraderie that you'd have at a night like that. This year that award's actually going to Mark Carney, and it's being done virtually. And I just can't imagine how that's going to be. But anyways, it's great. Look, my father came to Canada in 1974. And look, he's got a story, much like so many other Canadian immigrant families. And the story is just told over and over and over again. And, he came here, didn't know anybody, had $35 in his pocket. But, the story that we've all heard. In fact, it's funny, the first night he spent in Canada was at a hotel on Sherbourne and Bloor, which is actually just a few blocks away now from where I live. And I sometimes wonder if my father had actually walked from that hotel into Rosedale at that time, and if he would have ever thought or dreamed that one of his sons would be living here. But that's the story of Canada. And it also speaks a lot to my sort of passion for politics, Mitch. My dad and so many other really bright young Egyptians like him left Egypt because, it was even back then, a broken state, and certainly hasn't gotten any better. It's a functional state, but it certainly doesn't present any opportunities for a young, intelligent person. I often reflect if my father hadn't left Egypt and come to Canada, and he would have gotten married to my mother, and I would have been some Egyptian kid, what the heck would I be doing? And I often reflect on that. I think I'd probably be doing something that involved a little bit of hustle, and that involved getting money. Maybe I'd be selling cigarettes by the pyramids. That's not a crazy thing to think of. And I think one of the things that drives me really in politics is this thought process that, wow, preserving what we have here in Canada, this beautiful, 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 exceptional nation where people are free to to succeed. People are free to practice whatever faith they want. People are free to, be who they want to be and be the best version of themselves. And the only thing blocking, a first generation kid from becoming the chairman of one of the biggest law firms in the country is really, truly, truly hard work, and not where you grew up or what high school you went to or how rich your dad was. And my biggest passion, Mitch, and maybe you saw a little bit of it when we worked together in the provincial scene. My biggest passion is ensuring that that we're able to preserve in Canada that incredible way of life, because there's a lot of places in the world where, including, by the way, Western civilized nations. I don't know if my dad would have gone to the United Kingdom if I would have been the chairman of a law firm in the United Kingdom. But in Canada, you could do it, and I think it's something worth preserving and fighting for. And by the way, as much as fighting for, fighting against those on the left that want to take this social construct way too far and take advantage of the beauty that we've built here, and those on the right who might think that we need to move to a social construct that is less generous. And I think there's a real happy and decent medium there, and it's really worth fighting for, Mitch. And I know you've worked on a lot of public policy, and trying to find that happy medium, is important. And it's not only important for winning, it's important because the work that you do when you're developing public policy is incrementally, one way or another, either advancing this beautiful society that we're living in or hurting it.
So let's talk about that, because I think that's right. You've mentioned this happy medium, and you've mentioned some differing viewpoints, be it the left or the right. And so someone who's been around the game for a while and has worked on different campaigns, like you said, provincially and growing up. So, the Conservative Party of Canada goes into a leadership race, and I'm going to make the assumption that you could have supported any candidate and they would have been happy to have you, but you pick Erin O'Toole, and you ultimately become the co-chair of his campaign. So let me just ask a really basic question to start before we get into it a bit deeper. Why Erin?
I've had the privilege of knowing Erin for over 20 years. I got to know him on the youth political scene, but I was an articling student when he was applying for an articling job, and I very much wanted him to work at my law firm at the time, Blake Castles and Graydon. He ended up going to another great law firm, Stikeman Elliott, but that was we had many interactions before that, but that was the first interaction where I really came to admire the man. And look, over years, you get to see folks in different situations. You get to see them stressed. You get to see them with their families. You get to see them in really happy times and in really sad times. You get to see them winning. You get to see them losing. You get to see them opposite. Erin and I have actually been politically opposite each other quite a few times. He supported Christine Elliott. I supported Patrick Brown. Throughout that, though, and watching him with his family, and watching him when he made his decision to enter politics, I just consistently saw a man who was exceptionally decent, who was a family man, who was very politically astute, but that had this attribute that I really love in politicians, and that is does not have an end justifying the means type approach to politics. And there's a lot of politicians in the Western world who just sort of shrug their shoulders and say to you, look, we got to do this for political purposes. And I've always thought that that's lazy politicking. lazy politics. Sure, like sometimes the easiest thing to do is something that you think is popular, even though you disagree with it. But it's often, I find, lacking in an intellectual rigor that you want to see our political leaders have. And Erin has that. Erin, I have not witnessed him taking a public policy position just for an ends justifies the means type reason. He, like any politician, may nuance things, he may reflect on things, but he firmly is a country first man. I've watched him with his family. He's a family first man. He loves his two children dearly, and you might say, well, everybody's supposed to love their children. I was at his home the night before he won, and there's a small group of us having dinner. And one thing that I just observed that I won't forget for a while is he had all these guests, and he left us to go spend some quiet time with his daughter. And it was clear to me that wasn't that was that in his mind he was reflecting on, I did not maybe give proper due to a family member of mine today, or I need to spend some quality family time. And there's so many politicians that you and I know, Mitch, so many that would caught up in the ego boosting excitement and love of the moment. And that's not Erin. That's just not Erin. So for me, it was a really easy decision. And look, at early on, I remember in December, like Erin was there were stories coming out and Erin's name wasn't even in them as a possible candidate. Right?
Yeah, so that's something I want to pick up on, because I remember, in the Ontario race, I was in the interim leader's office at the time, so I wasn't involved in the leadership race. But you were working with Patrick Brown, and he used to say something along the lines of, when he first started, he was polling below the margin of error, and lo and behold, comes back and wins the thing. And so here you've got a similar type of situation with Erin. You've got a really well-known name in Peter MacKay, and maybe a bit of an absence of a presence on the right until sort of Leslyn Lewis comes up during the campaign. So, what's that strategic decision-making process like as to how to try to get his name out there, how to paint Erin? Was there a particular decision that you look back on, or a set of decisions you look back on that said that really helped us get ahead? Or was it just, some old-fashioned hard work and church basements and that sort of thing?
So it starts off with old-fashioned hard work in church basements. And that's literally what Erin did. I felt it right in December when speaking with Erin. He was singularly focused on winning. And he really had this drive, which, you see in certain leaders, that he was going to take this. He was going to win, and so it started with him. He was really driven, really focused, and then he built a really incredible team. Some of whom worked with him in his last leadership run, and others who worked with him afterwards. And so, first among them was Fred Delory. And Fred is a really special leader, and really rare to find this kind of leader in politics. He's a very compassionate man with a very high IQ. Very high EQ. He has a very high IQ as well, but he has a very high EQ. And he led a campaign that I would say to you was completely drama-free. I challenge folks in any of one of the political parties that would be listening to this. He truly ran a campaign that was drama free, and he did that because he has a very high EQ. The second person is Tasha Michaud, and Tasha's now his chief of staff, and incredibly capable woman. Tasha is the closest person to Erin O'Toole, without any question. She has his full confidence, and she, just works, really hard to make sure that his interests and who he is reflected in all different parts of the campaign. So Tasha was excellent. Dan Robertson, who you know well, Mitch. Dan is just a gifted strategist, and I think that was a very unique element of the campaign, is that there was always a strategy. The campaign did not have a single day without a strategy, and I can't tell you how important that was. And Dan really crafted that. Look, there's lots of other great people that you'd know, Mitch, and that many of your listeners would know. Jim Burnett did a phenomenal job organizationally across the country. Melanie Parody, is truly, for me, one of the best media relations people that I've ever had the privilege of working with. So and the list goes on and on. There's Tanis Drysdale, Mitch Wexler, and so it was really an incredible team that was focused on a strategy, with a drama-free campaign, and with a leader that was singularly focused on winning. And that's what did it.
Right. So you've got this team in place, you're doing the work. It looks like it could be going well. I mean, there were times in the campaign where I'm sure you had very high days and low days, as with every campaign, but all of a sudden, the pandemic hits. How does that change the way, and I'm particularly interested in someone who's been around campaigning for so long, how does that change the way in which you run a campaign? And how do you think that changes the campaign for Erin moving forward as leader?
So it completely changed it, right? Like it was, I remember right before, I had these crazy plans of going into places after he was there by a few days and meeting people, and many campaigners and people across this country involved in political parties, you sort of, I know Ontario very, very, very well, but I know very few people in Saskatchewan involved in the party other than certain members of the leadership. And so, it certainly changed things. And I actually think, again, Erin's discipline really came on display, because he just set up a studio in his home and just did hundreds of Zoom calls and thousands of telephone calls to members across the country. And it really worked. How does it change going forward? Look, I think that story is still going to be written. He's doing a mix right now of Zoom and in person. He is still traveling. It'll be interesting to watch. I mean, you look at the different approaches of Biden and Trump, right? Trump is still holding these weird rallies, and Biden, does these things with people in cars honking yesterday, and that looked weird too. What's the right answer? I don't think anybody's really figured that out. But as my friend Dan Robertson always likes to say, maybe we're past the time of big campaign planes and buses and all this stuff that was part of our almost the romantic side of politics. Maybe that's changed. Maybe it's going to be a lot more Facebook Lives and a lot more social media engagement. One of the things that has just surprised me, and I'm 43 years old. I don't feel old. I certainly feel even a lot younger than that. But recently I was introduced to SixBuzz. I'm sure you've heard of SixBuzz, Mitch. And SixBuzz is an Instagram account, and it's run by a couple of Somali kids not kids, but young men in Etobicoke. These guys have 1.9 million followers, most of them in the GTA, most of them 18 to 24-year-olds. Just think about that for a sec. That's where these young people are getting their news. They're getting it from an Instagram account run by a couple of young men in Etobicoke. And you reflect on that for a second, and you think, how is it that we're going to go tackle those guys, right? On the other hand, you watch Jagmeet Singh, and he's on TikTok, and my 16-year-old daughter the other day said to me, Dad, I think this is a little goofy, because doing morning vibes on TikTok in the middle of a pandemic, with an audience that is mainly not voting, doesn't seem to be a very smart use of time. So, the truth is, I don't know the answer, but there's so much to digest out there, and there's so much for us to reflect on in terms of what's next, not only for this next prime ministerial campaign, but for the next leadership campaign whenever it happens, and the next, provincial election, and so much others. And I think there's just going to be a lot of thought process. I'll add this as well, Mitch, and it's something I've really learned on the business side for me. I think having young people around is not just important for great energy, and it's important for how to communicate. Like we need to be making sure that we're at the cutting edge of communication. I'm embarrassed that I only learned about 6Buzz a few months ago. There's 1.9 million Ontarians in the GTA on this Instagram site. That's where they get most of their news. And here I am, a person who's supposedly caring for and involved in public policy. I didn't even know about it. So there's a lot to learn.
Yeah, it's a great point for a variety of reasons. I'm reminded of I staffed an MPP once at an event with some students from New York who were on a visiting trip, and one of the things they asked was like, how much money did you spend on your campaign? And this MPP had been reelected several times, and I think he said something like, I don't know, between 50 and 60,000, and their jaws dropped because they're used to millions upon millions and PACs and super PACs, and this one MPP just did it the old-fashioned way, knocked on doors and talked to people, and whether it's Instagram or actually doing that, that seems to be what we're moving ourselves back to in a little bit more of a way. So I think it really is an interesting point about how we're going to adapt to those things. But I do want to ask, because you're talking about these issues and how Erin can break through as the conservative leader, and I think one of the things he's got to do right now is he's got to put his voice out there and his views. A lot of people still don't know who he is, despite a very successful leadership campaign. And so you've seen in the early days some more progressive language when it comes to things like climate change or social issues, but on some other issues like perhaps China-Canada relations, it's a little bit more aggressive. So I'm curious, as someone who knows him well, did you expect him to sort of pick a lane and be typically defined as a centrist or a right winger, or do you see this sort of case by case pragmatism being the way forward for Erin for the next little while?
As long as I've known him, has just been a pragmatic person, right? And I think he's going to defy labels. I think that he's going to confuse people, and I think that that's going to be refreshing for Canadians. Canadians want somebody who's not going to be just looking at a particular playbook and saying, hey, this is I got to go hard right on everything. Or people just want pragmatism. And you know what? People are pragmatic in their own lives. Even the most devout pastor or imam or rabbi or religious leader has to have some pragmatism for their followers, for God's sake. And that's with a faith. Surely we can find some pragmatism in our public policy and in the way that we approach things. Look, the beautiful social contract that we have had in this country for decades is stressed right now. There are certainly, everything from some of the important provincial issues for us on wait times in hospitals to, what it means to be charging people taxes at a level that restrains productivity. These things are all being questioned right now. We're spending, our deficit this year is greater than Stephen Harper's entire first budget. Think about that. And I'm not sitting here to tell you that, we shouldn't do that in circumstances that Mother Nature has given us. What I am saying to you is, it is foolish, these people who make arguments that we can print money forever, and therefore the social contract is becoming stressed, and therefore we have to make important decisions. And those decisions are going to play a very important role in defining who we are in the future. And being pragmatic, notwithstanding your label as a conservative or a liberal or a dipper, is going to be critical. And I think that's what's going to be rewarded by voters.
And so I think I subscribe to that philosophy as well. But it's not just about, seeing yourself in the issues. Certainly there's pragmatism that needs to occur so that a variety of people can see themselves in the policies being put forward by Mr. O'Toole or by others. But there's also something to be said about seeing yourself depending on where you live or who you are. And one of the things that I found particularly interesting about Erin O'Toole's sort of 2 a.m. victory speech, obviously not planned for 2 a.m, but so be it, was specific references to issues in Quebec. He mentioned the Saguenay, a few different places, specific references to some of those issues. Andrew Scheer didn't necessarily resonate too well in Quebec. It looks like Erin O'Toole's going to want to try and change that around. How important is it to get Quebec voters to identify as conservative voters, and how hard do you think that is to do?
Look, Erin's got a real vision about winning in all parts of the country, and I'm going to tell you what it's rooted in. It's rooted in a true belief in federalism and in nation building. He is very conscious of the stresses that our federal system has in it right now. He's very conscious of the fact that the federal Liberal Party doesn't have any seats in Alberta or Saskatchewan. I think they may have still one in Manitoba. Very conscious that the Conservative Party hasn't done as well in Atlantic Canada in the last go around. It has a presence in Quebec, but needs to do a lot better. And he has a vision of a true national party with representation across the country, not only because that's a formula for him becoming prime minister, but also because it's how you're going to unite the country. And that's not easy. It's not easy. I've got 5 offices for my law firm. We're in Quebec City and Montreal and Ottawa and Toronto and Calgary and Vancouver, and I can tell you that just in trying to unite an economic partnership that's fully integrated, that has its challenges, let alone different human beings in these vast geographies with vastly different socioeconomic, demographic, and cultural needs and attributes. So it's not going to be easy, but he's a visionary, and it's what he's trying to achieve. And I say watch out for him, because I think he's going to surprise Canadians.
Yeah, and as we approach the end of the podcast, I mean, I don't like to try to make guests predict anything, so I won't quite do that. But, you mentioned national unity. We've also obviously got the recovery from COVID-19. We've got gender imbalance in terms of that recovery in the workforce. We've got an upcoming presidential election that could very well change or continue our role in North America and with our neighbors to the south. And you already mentioned getting our finances back under control, regardless of who's in power over the next little while. So it's a pretty daunting set of challenges that were not necessarily all there when Erin O'Toole started this leadership campaign. Which do you think is going to be the biggest challenge, and which do you think the party and Mr. O'Toole need to do the best job on showing Canadians that they're the right leader and the right choice to tackle it?
The biggest challenge of our time, without any question, is how to deal with COVID-19 and the pandemic. And it's an incredible challenge for a government in the same way it's an incredible challenge for a family or an individual or a business. I remind my own partners at my law firm that we've changed our business plan 3 times this year. I've had 3 different predictions from our management team as to how profitable we are going to be by the end of this year. Restaurants in Ontario are closed today. I just visited one before jumping onto this podcast, and they're definitely hurting. coming up with the solution that is going to work for Canadians in Quebec City and Montreal and Vancouver and Edmonton and Winnipeg and Toronto is going to be a challenge. But I do like making predictions. And so I'm going to make this prediction. And my prediction for you, Mitch, is that Erin O'Toole will be the Prime Minister of Canada inside of 12 months. I believe in that firmly, and I believe in him, and I believe in the team that he's assembling, and I believe he's going to succeed.
I like it. You're like Mark Messier. We will win the cup. It's no.
How about I added Joe Biden, inshallah, as well?
Yeah. No, that's quite the bold prediction. I mean, obviously, in a minority government, anything can happen in terms of the confidence of the legislature. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, do you think maybe the last question I'll ask you? Do you think an early election helps his chances?
I don't think it makes a difference. I think if we have a little bit more time, people are going to get to know the Erin O'Toole that I and so many other people know, and I think that'll be a very good thing. If it's called early, I think the Liberals will pay a price for going at an election in circumstances where they have the NDP who are propping them up. And look at, I think Erin wouldn't take too long for Canadians to see them for the decent man that he is. I don't think it makes a difference. My prediction stands without whether it's an early election or a late election.
Well, we'll just have to have you back on the program in about 12 or 13 months' time to do a postmortem of how things shook out. So. This is Walied.
It'd be an honor.
Yeah, really appreciate you coming on the program. We know how busy you are, and hopefully over the next little while you get a chance to sort of recharge the batteries a little bit before that next big election or campaign. So really appreciate the conversation and the time today.
I look forward to working with you again soon, Mitch, as well.
Thank you for listening to Intended Consequences, the official podcast of the Strategy Corps Institute of Public Policy and Economy, produced by Sarah Bordeaux and myself. Views expressed during this podcast are not necessarily the views of Strategy Corp. All rights to this episode are reserved, and guests on the podcast may be current or past clients of Strategy Corp. To find out more about the Institute and to subscribe to our written material or to find past episodes of the podcast, please visit our website at www.strategycorp.com/institute. Until next time, I'm Mitch Davidson.